الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Welcome to Ahlul Bayt Live, a series that we've got running throughout the 10 nights, throughout the 10 days of Muharram. We're discussing various different topics with regards to the tragedy of Karbala. Delighted once again to be joined by Sister Amina Inlaw. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Thank you very much for taking the time out once again.
There's no time out when it comes to Imam Hussain. It is time.
Ahsan, shukran. I suppose that could be a topic in and of itself, the service that everyone feels so inclined to during these 10 days.
Inshallah, it's an honor and a blessing, not a burden.
One of the topics for today, what we feel quite important to discuss, I feel, is many of the time we rely so much on the traditions and narratives that we know with regards to what happened on that day and what people have narrated about what happened on that day. But of course, there are a lot of narrations with regards to the actual sermons that the Imam gave. This is going back from the time that he and his family left Medina all the way to Mecca, going towards Kufa and then being redirected. There are plenty of sermons, and as you mentioned before the show, these can be found in various different texts. It's not all grouped together in one specific text. And I thought in that light, if we can use this hour to touch on some of the things that he has mentioned, because I feel not only is there an element where we can try and understand what the Imam was trying to relate to the people that were there, or what the Imam was thinking, but also what we can take today from those words.
I think that is an excellent idea. What better way to know the Imam, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him and his forefathers and his descendants as well, including the Imam of our time, than through what is actually related from him. Indeed, may I be harsh? Sometimes in this day and age, people make their own constructions of Ahlul Bayt, of the Holy Prophet and the Imams and so forth. Of course, there's nothing wrong with taking lessons for our lives. We can say what might they have done in our circumstances. But some people just get out their own paintbrush and decide to make their own picture and then share it on Facebook, for example. And I don't mean a picture. I mean a picture out of words. So I think it is a very good idea to look at what we actually have related in our texts attributed to the Imam, to begin to try to understand his personality, his akhlaq, and his stance better. So thank you for bringing up this very important and valuable subject and approach.
Thank you. I suppose before we get into the actual words specifically, I was wondering, from a general point of view, with regards to how reliable or how authentic the narrations or the collections we have with regards to the entire maqtal or the entire narration that depict what happened from the time that the Imam left Medina all the way to the end.
Yeah.
That whole corpus of, say, 3-4 months of what has been narrated or written down or collected, how authentic, I don't know if authentic is the right word to use, but how reliable, how much gravitas can we give those words and those texts? And though they are obviously quite early, some were quite early, how much reliability can we put into these collections?
That is a very deep and complicated question. You did touch on something there which doesn't really have to do with reliability, but that is a difference between what happened and narrative construction. I'm not sure if that's of interest to the viewers or not. But keeping in mind, as human beings, we try to process history to make it into something which is understandable and that has a beginning and an end. So a series of stories. It's a story. Not just facts and statements and narrations. There's no particular reason why the account of what happened in Karbala has to begin with leaving the holy city of Medina, through Mecca, through different stops all the way to Karbala and then to Kufa and Sham and Medina. And that's what we do traditionally. That is a complete account, if you will. That is a full story with a beginning and end, but it's not like Allah started the time at one time and stopped the time at the end. This is simply how, over the years, people chose to remember it because it made sense. So that in and of itself is not somehow divinely ordained. It's simply our understanding of the history, which is fine. I'm not critiquing that. I'm just saying we have to keep in mind there was a judgment call that was made to tell the story in that fashion, in a way that is meaningful to ourselves. As for what we have narrated, the events in Karbala are some of the most widely reported events in Islamic history. As has been observed, one of the unique features of some of the accounts of Karbala is that it is one of those battles that is largely reported by the enemies. That is to say, many of those who tell what happened on the day of Ashura were actually fighting against the Imam. Whereas usually history is written by the victors, and usually they end up shaping it into their own way. But we do have a certain bulk of material that comes from people who were not necessarily with the Imam, obviously, because many of them were killed. That being said, we do also have narrations from the rest of Ahlul Bayt, alayhimus salam, for example, from the Imams who came later, or from the survivors too. So it's actually a very complicated question. No one can seriously argue that the battle that took place in Karbala did not happen. Yes, I have heard people attempt to argue that, or they say it didn't happen in Muharram, it happened in, I don't know, Rabi al-Awwal or something. That's very difficult to argue. That's like saying Jesus didn't exist. Yes, there are people who say Jesus didn't exist. There was someone some years ago who said the Holy Prophet didn't exist. She retracted that statement before she passed away. Incidentally, she passed away of brain cancer. But the point is that it's very widely reported that this happened. There are certain basic aspects that are very clear. Why Imam Hussain was going to Karbala, the situation with the Umayyads at the time. You don't really find anyone in Islamic history saying, no, actually, okay, I retract that again. I'm not going to say you're not going to find anyone, because people say everything. But in general, there's an understanding that something went wrong around the time of Yazid, and that Imam Hussain was slaughtered, and there was a lot of corruption that was happening among the Umayyads. This is not something limited to the Shia. It's narrated in a lot of books. Now, when we get into what I would say minor details, now I know sometimes we can be very sensitive about details, but it's good to take a step back and say, okay, exact details of what happened, or did this person say 100% that, or even with some of the people there, was their name exactly this or exactly that? Yeah, you can still look into texts and try to find these things and try to sort them out. But I would put forth the point that, inshallah, the most important thing is just to simply approach the history we have with an open mind and an open heart, to take what is good. As the Imams have told us, if something from the Imams conflicts with the Holy Quran, then we set it aside. So God forbid if there's something conflicting with the Holy Quran, then we set it aside. But in general, we take it, and we take what is good. We pray that Allah guides us to what is right, and we try to take the meaning out of it. You know, as human beings, we do tend to get very caught up in, I would say, very minor points, which are not generally the big picture. When we look at the Holy Quran, Allah Ta'ala talks about the big picture. He doesn't say even sometimes what this person's name, like Mu'min Ali Fir'aun, what is that person's name, or what year did this happen in, what month, what time, how many people were there, how many wings do the angels have, etc. You know, Allah, He presents the big points, so we get the point. And it's the same thing with the lives of the Imams. I believe that we should focus on the main messages, and the details are simply there to support the main message. I would say that sometimes when we take a very small detail and try to make a really big picture out of it, or some people try to pass fatwas out of little tiny details that are maybe in a book that came a few hundred years later, maybe that's not the brightest choice. I'm not saying the Maraja do that, but I mean like ordinary people, you know, like me, for example. Well, actually, I'm talking against it, but not me. But you know what I mean. People on Twitter and Facebook, they'll sometimes say, well, I found this bit in, like, I don't know, the history of Ibn Kathir, and so here's my fatwa of the day. That's obviously not what a responsible scholar does. A responsible scholar understands that history, there is some truth and maybe there is some untruth, and we try to find what is true, and we ask Allah to guide us. And the most important thing, again, is we ask Allah to keep us firm in our belief. There is no doubt that the central message of Islam is Tawheed, so we worship Allah. It's the central message of the Quran, it's the central message of the Prophet and the Imams, it's the central message of the Fitrah. When it comes to the Imams, following the Imams, having wilayah, this is a central message. Whether every single narration is true is less important than whether or not we are being sincere to that wilayah.
So thank you. I suppose, you know, like I mentioned before the show, the intention of bringing up this question was to get people thinking and to get people researching and to find out some of the points that they feel relate to them best. Maybe they want to know where it has come from, where it's come about, who are the scholars, etc. And you know, this information is all there. It's about instilling that impetus within all of us to check, to read, to try and understand better.
I would actually argue against that. A lot of it actually isn't there. We have lost a fair amount of books in our history. For example, there used to be a very major hadith collection in the past, gone, probably burnt or something in during wars and so forth. A lot of historical documents we have in the past gone. I mean, if you look at Bihar al-Anwar, which is one of the really big collections we have, one of the driving forces of Alama Majlisi to compile that was to preserve some of these more obscure texts from getting completely destroyed. So he traveled around to get manuscripts and documents from here and there, things that we don't have them anymore nowadays. So we don't have a perfect body of literature from the past. We have what we have. Now, alhamdulillah, we live in a day and age where it is much easier to access this material compared even to our ancestors. Our ancestors needed encyclopedia memories to research subjects because they had to have so many books and they didn't have all these books all around them all the time and they don't know where to look here or there. So they had to remember everything. Now we can do what my colleague used to call insta-mujtahid and pop open our library software and search something like, I don't know, Ashura or some narration that we have in mind. And you can immediately get results. What book is it in? Of course, it's not perfect. You might lose out on some things. But the point is the ability to research is much easier nowadays. The access to books, even our favorite Sheikh Google, even with respect to the Shi'i texts nowadays, and it wasn't like this in the past, you just type it in. You can oftentimes, even if you don't type it correctly, get it very easily. So the access is there, but again, it's important to have humility and remember we don't have everything. Again, we use what we have. We ask Allah to guide us. When Imam Zaman comes, he will fill in the gaps, inshallah.
Ahsan, shukran. We actually have a caller on the line
Great.
with regards to this. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
What would you like to say with regards to this topic?
Actually, brother, maybe I have a different question from the topic, but just wanted to know a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
I've got a query. Actually, just wanted to know that Jesus, he was the pious son of Bibi Maryam, and what he has left for his disciples, that is today what for whosoever they are, that is Christians, they said that they are disciples of Jesus. So just wanted to know that what Jesus has left for them for a message, that how they will be guided after him.
Yeah.
And one more thing, and who has given the right to disciples to create worshipping places.
Okay, Ahsan.
And one more question, the last question before I forget, is very important, that why Bibi Fatima used to come in the dream of Bibi Nargis, and was that she wanted to bring the heart near to the God, that without, irrespective of the religion, that whosoever his soul is the best and pious will be accepted by God. What was the reason why she came in Bibi Nargis' dream only? Why not in any other Muslim? Bibi Fatima wanted to unite people? Or what was the reason?
Ahsan. Thank you.
The third question is,
Sure.
Why, when we have got amulets, then why we are not using those amulets for Imam Zamana for his quick reappearance, as we have heard from some ulemas in some
Is
of
that
our
amals,
books.
did you say, yeah?
Sorry?
Did you say amals?
Amulets.
Amulets.
Yes,
Okay.
tabiz.
Okay.
So because in our books, most of the books, either Sunni or Shia, they have got their tabiz, like if somebody is not present and you want to have a look, or you want him to come back, so why those tabiz are not being used by our ulamas for his quick reappearance? Thank you.
Ahsan, thank you very much.
Okay. Have a nice day.
Ahsan. So we had 3 questions. we'll try to discuss them briefly if you...
Yeah, thank you, sister, for calling in and keeping us busy, inshallah.
So she mentioned something similar to the topic that we're discussing with regards to the Bible, in terms of, you know, what was the message that was left by Prophet Isa himself before he went into hiding. Do we have that, etc., authenticity likewise? I know it's very difficult. And
yes, that's a difficult question. We can break it down into several things, some of which I can shed some light on, some of which I cannot, perhaps much of which I cannot. Obviously, the Holy Quran mentions that Nabi Isa alayhi salam came with the Injil, which we don't have. What we have as the Bible, we don't feel it's the Injil. In our hadith, we do have some quotations from the original teachings of Jesus, peace be upon him. Sometimes it's of interest to share that in interfaith gatherings with Christians so they can see what we believe about Jesus. There's some similarity. It's not like it's a completely different thing. I mean, charity, love for human beings, humility, divorcing oneself from this world, not being attached to this world. We do have that. As for what he instructed his disciples to do, what he gave them authority to do after them, with respect to the construction of the church, the codification of the Bible, this is something I do not know. I do not know if some of our ulama may be able to shed light on this, if we have it recorded at all. There is the view among some people, in part due to the fact, the teaching that Allah does not leave the earth devoid of a hujjah, or a proof of Allah, that the succession to Jesus continued. And so person after person to Abu Talib and eventually to the Holy Prophet and Imam Ali. I admit I'm a bit on the fence about that. I am not 100% convinced of the succession of certain people, but some people, especially some very mystically inclined people, do feel there is this central defining religious figure similar to the Imam who came after Jesus, peace be upon him. The idea is there anyway, and there is some precedence for it in our hadith. It's just, like I said, I'm not personally certain on that matter. I'm also not an expert on the Bible, especially the non-canonical books, but I'm certain that if you consult some of the non-canonical books of the Bible, you might find some answers as well. Maybe you can do some research, inshallah, and call in and share it. I do think it's a very important question. It's just something I'm not specialized in. So question number one.
The other questions, though they're not very related, if you can just very quickly go through them. She mentioned that Bibi Narjis had a dream where Bibi Fatima came. Is this something we've seen in the texts? Or?
Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam come to many people in dreams. Sometimes the prophets come to people in dreams, sometimes the imams. They don't only come to Shia. Hazrat Fatima comes to other people too. They don't only come to Muslims. I'm sure if you start asking people, you can find a lot of people who saw the Holy Prophet or Imam Ali or Hazrat Fatima, also even other figures, the Virgin Mary, Jesus, and so forth in their dreams. Some people convert to Islam for that reason. People who've seen, for example, Ali Akbar in their dreams. It's quite common. It's established in our texts. It's normal. One would guess that Allah would probably especially want the mother of the Imam to have a connection with Ahlul Bayt and to open the door to what is hidden. There are things that Allah can show us in our dreams easily that we don't easily see in our waking life. As much as we love Hazrat Fatima, if she were to walk into here right now, we'd probably run screaming mad, because it's not normal that we see someone who's deceased in the room with us. But to see them in a dream is something our soul will understand clearly, and it's established in our texts. We can see the deceased in our dreams. There are many accounts of that, especially with respect to Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We enjoy it. Many people ask Allah to grant us visions of the Imams and Prophets and Hazrat Fatima in our dreams, inshallah. Yes, it is mentioned in the account that the sister mentioned that Hazrat Narjis did see Bibi Fatima in her dream. At the risk of getting tomatoes thrown at me, I just want to mention we do have multiple accounts about the story of Bibi Narjis and her origins. Not every Muslim scholar, not every history book agrees that she was a princess from Rome or Byzantium. And some people say she was from somewhere in Africa. And that account actually doesn't have a lot of detail, so it doesn't describe the dream, and it doesn't really describe her as uniting the Christians and the Muslims. That's another narration. If you wish to weigh these narrations textually, you can't. I mean, Al-Kafi actually does not support the the view that she came from Rome or Byzantium. It supports the other view. If you want to weigh them, you can try to use historical evidence to see which seems like the more plausible, but it is an account that we generally hear. I think people tend to prefer the story that she was a princess, maybe because it's more interesting, and we tend to prefer stories of royalty. But there are a lot of people who will say it's not the more stronger one. Allahu Alam. It doesn't really matter. Like I was saying, what matters is that she is the mother of the Imam, whoever she's from. The Imam is the Imam of all time. He's the Imam of all people. It doesn't matter whether his mother was Christian or Muslim or a slave or a princess or from this country or that country. The Imam is coming for all human beings. As we were talking about before, the Imam is not only for the people even. It's for the angels and the animals and all of the creations. So these are really, they're important details to us because we as human beings are a tribal people, we're a nationalistic people, we look at identity according to race and ethnicity and these things. Allah doesn't look at us like this. When we stand there in the Qiyamah, He's not going to go, Amina, were you from Los Angeles? Were you considered white, Caucasian in your country? Were you from this or that social class and this is your degree? No, Allah is going to look at the soul. The soul does not have any of these characteristics. So when Allah looks at the mother of the Imam, He looks at the soul of the person, in this case the soul of Bibi Narjis, and not the origin, where is she from here or there. These are things we argue about and then people get into Facebook wars about.
Yeah. The third one was about amulets, and you know, whether there's been any recommendation to wear them for the reappearance of the 12th Imam, or why our scholars do not insist on this or something like that.
I do not know if specifically there are amulets recommended in our texts for the Zuhur of the Imam, but perhaps the sister knows better. In any case, we do all forms of ibadah and a'mal out of hope for Allah's mercy and Allah's answering. There is, of course, some support for that in our texts. In general, whatever we do sincerely to pray for the Imam to come, whether it's through a physical manifestation of our hope in Allah and our ibadah, whether it's through our dua, whether it's reciting the dua from our books, like in Arabic, whether it's in our native language, whether it's we do an act of charity seeking the mercy of Allah. We do all of these things according to how we feel Allah will answer us. And it's not for me to tell people in what ways they should seek the mercy of Allah insofar as it is halal, and especially if there is some support for it. Now, if someone thinks something is haram, then obviously they shouldn't do it, but that's a different issue. We do pray that the Imam will return. The return of the Imam is in the end in the hands of Allah. We pray for his zuhur. We are definitely in need. Perchance we will become even more in need. The world is not going a good direction these days, sadly. But nonetheless, there is a divine plan behind it. And so I think for us nowadays, in addition to praying for the zuhur in whatever manner we wish to do it, whether or not it's through physical artifacts, if you will, the important thing is to try to maintain a connection with the Imam and to try to be open to his guidance, even if it is, as you will, the sun behind the clouds. I do believe the Imam does guide us. I mean, obviously, if someone comes and tells you, I'm getting messages from Imam Mahdi and do this, do that, no, we say, okay, that's, someone who publicizes that is not correct unless they actually have signs, and the big signs like the cry from the heavens and the sun rising in the west and these things. If they've got the big signs down, then we pay attention to them. And if not, there's always been people who say, I'm Imam Mahdi or I'm the Mahdi's vizier. It happens in every generation. Mm-hmm. However, the important thing is to have that connection and to try to discover inside ourselves what the Imam wills from us, to try to live in such a way. After all, specifically if you are a Shi'i, even if you're not a Shi'i, it doesn't matter. We have an Imam, we follow him. That's our job, to follow our Imam. Again, I think all of us should pray for the zuhur according to whatever manner we are aware of and whatever manner we feel that Allah would respond to.
I suppose, I dropped my pen. We can take this time now, we have a few moments left to try and discuss some of these issues with regards to some of the sermons. I've taken a few. I think I'd like to start with one where he was speaking to Hur and his army. Mm-hmm. And the Imam said, "O people, the Prophet has said that when you see an oppressive ruler legitimizing that which has been prohibited by Allah and breaking his covenant, and opposing the customs of the Prophet, and he behaves unjustly and oppressively with Allah's servants, then if a person does not oppose him through his word or deed, it is incumbent upon Allah to place that person on the status of the oppressor. So again here, it's quite clear, it is incumbent upon Allah to place that person on the same status as that of the actual oppressor himself. I mean, that's quite really a weighty statement that, you can have an oppressor, but if someone doesn't oppose him through deed or word, then, we're more or less the same.
Yeah, or as the narration from Imam Ali says, deed or word or heart. Sometimes there's really nothing we can do for whatever reason. Well, I think there's a number of very key points we can take from that. One, of course, is that one of the most fundamental Islamic teachings is justice, whether it's divine justice or social justice. And one of the most severe sins is injustice. Injustice and arrogance tend to go together. And these are the things that lead people to divine punishment and also bring down societies. Now, hopefully, I am proverbially preaching to the converted here, and we all know that injustice is forbidden in Islam. But let's be honest. A lot of us focus on very minor details, like is a woman wearing sleeve extenders or not? And we don't look at the big picture like, hey, who's running the government? Are they killing people unjustly and oppressing them? Or even within the family, is there injustice going on? Are people being treated equally when it comes to race? Let's be honest, in many countries, not only Muslim countries, women get the short end of the stick. So there's loads of social injustice going on throughout the world. It happens in the Muslim world, let's be honest. It happens in a lot of arenas. And one of the most fundamental teachings of the Holy Prophet ﷺ was to break down these artificial social divisions where some people are given certain advantages over others for no reason, that they've done nothing to gain it, just because this is arbitrary. Society has made some people different from others in that way. And to promote a more just and more equitable society. I mean, it doesn't mean we're ever going to get rid of stuff like social class and this sort of thing. But there are some basic ideas. Someone does a job, they should get paid fairly. They should get a similar salary to someone else. You should arrange someone's wage before they start working. You don't just decide afterwards, sorry, I'm going to pay them less, for example, I'm not going to pay them at all. That happens. When people have the ability to oppress others, many times it happens. People who are in need in society, for example, they can't work or they're ill, theoretically they should be taken care of. I mean, that was the practice of Imam Ali, right? So these are some of the fundamental values of Islam, and here Imam Hussain alayhi salam is very clearly saying that they are fundamentals, that it is against the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to be engaging in this type of social oppression. Now, with respect to the topic of enjoining what is good, or amr bil ma'ruf, one of the things we find repeated from the Imams, even in the Holy Quran, let's go to the Holy Quran first. What does Allah Ta'ala say about the Muslim nation, the Muslim Ummah? He says, we are the best of nations insofar as we are doing amr bil ma'ruf, insofar as we are enjoining what is good. That means there's a connection here. We're not just great because we get Muslim names, or even we say our salat 5 times a day and we do our fasting. Now, that's all important. Even the name is very good. It's very good to be named Hassan or Fatima and so forth. However, the characteristic that Allah puts next to the idea that the Muslim Ummah is good, may I even venture to say superior, is if and only if we are standing up for what is right. Now, I'm sorry to say, may I put on my scolding, grandma face here?
Ahead.
Unfortunately, many of us in our community have a misconception about amr bil ma'ruf. Now, the way it happens is you have a lot of people doing amr bil ma'ruf in a very wrong way. They're very judgmental, and it's really an ego trip for them, sorry to say. And half the time, it's completely things that they're ignorant about. They're telling off someone for something they don't know about, really. They're just saying, well, I don't like this, or this contradicts what I've heard about religion. A lot of times, they're not even brave about it. They do it on Facebook behind people's backs. They don't have the guts to go to someone and say, you did this and that, and I genuinely am concerned about you. It doesn't come from a position of compassion. You know, if someone comes up to me and says, Sister Amina, or whatever you wish to call me, Dr. Amina, Ms. Amina, I'm genuinely worried about you because you did this and that, and I am afraid that you might be harming your faith or even maybe having a bad impact on society, and I want to talk to you sincerely. Now, I might not be comfortable with that, but I will respect the sincerity, the kindness, the humility of that person. Let me give you another example. I mean, I'm sorry to use these examples, but I'm hoping you guys don't know the people. I was at one of our holy shrines, and there was a girl who was about 6 years old. She had some arms showing. Mind you, she's not even at the age where hijab is wajib. Someone came and hit her on the arm like that. And she started to scream at her about hijab, and this is the haram of this person, and you can't, it's shameful to walk like this. Do you think that girl is going to grow up loving Islam? Do you think she's going to grow up loving religious people? And do you think that act comes out of a sincere desire to reach out to people, to help them, to uplift them? Did the Prophet ever act like that to people? You know, it said that when the Prophet didn't like something from people, and when it was, I mean, unless it's like someone standing there with a sword or something, what would the Prophet do? He would look away. That was how he would signal his displeasure with people, and people would know that he was displeased. He was very good with his body language. Or he would phrase things in a nice manner that would invite people to do what is good. This is Amr bil Ma'ruf. But instead, what we have nowadays, we've got basically all sorts of Hades breaking loose throughout the world. We have people in power creating wars, and you know, people who can't sometimes visit their relatives in this or that country, families broken up because of visa laws and this and that, rampant unemployment and all sorts of corruption. And then we have people yelling at each other because you follow this scholar, you don't like this person, we saw you at this place. Even when it comes to religious commemorations, you commemorate Imam Hussain like this or like that. This is not Amr bil Ma'ruf. Amr bil Ma'ruf is genuinely an act of humility, sincerity, and faith. Now, the Imams have told us that if we leave behind Amr bil Ma'ruf, the society will fall apart, and it will be lawful for Allah to bring destruction upon us. May God keep us from that. So we do have an obligation to be socially conscious as Muslims and as humans. I say as Muslims because this is what our religion teaches us. We should speak out against things we feel are unjust, whether they relate to the quote-unquote Muslim community or not. We should try to speak up for social justice, for political justice, for what we believe to be the genuine values of faith. Even though many times people emphasize a clash of civilizations nowadays, really, our belief is based on the fitrah. Yes, maybe the average person who's not Muslim might not understand, for example, what we're reciting in our prayer, if it's in a language they don't speak, but they're going to be able to get the main ideas of our belief if we express them in a good fashion. So these are all areas where we can and should engage in Amr bil Ma'ruf. And of course, as this sermon is saying, one of the main areas to do that is in the face of social or political oppression.
So we have only 5 minutes left. A couple of things that I wanted to touch on, but just very quickly, what we're speaking about now, it reminds me of a sermon that the Imam was given before he even entered the battlefield himself. He says, "O people, listen to what I say and do not make haste, so that I may fulfill the responsibility to counsel you, which rests upon me, and that I may submit my plea regarding my arrival towards you." So just very quickly, the idea that, you know, even at that last moment, the Imam is making his responsibility of counseling the people in front of him who are ready to attack him and kill him.
Absolutely.
So another thing that I just wanted to touch on very quickly here, this is a completely different topic, but when reaching Karbala on the 2nd of Muharram, the Imam said, and this is, he may have been speaking to the people that have brought him there as well as his own companions, he says, "People are the slaves of this world, and religion is only a lip service for them. And they will take care of it, as in the religion, until it is pleasurable, or for as long as it's pleasurable. And when the crucible of trials approaches, only a few religious ones remain." I think if we can end the show looking specifically at this one, I think there's a major lesson here for us as well, where, you know, religion is paramount when it suits us often.
Absolutely. Allah tries all of us. Can we just say we believe and Allah will leave us alone? No, Allah will try us in many ways. Now, if we are fortunate, if we are successful, inshallah, and if we have the mercy of Allah, we will get through these tests as stronger people, showing that indeed we do believe in Allah and we do hold firm to whatever we know is right. I mean, sometimes this can be things that are very much, one can say, I don't want to say on the surface of religion, but for example, not eating haram meat. That, to be honest, is not the world's biggest test. I'm not saying it's not a big thing. I'm saying there's usually bigger tests than that. But sometimes our tests are these like basic things. But sometimes they're really, really tough decisions we have to make. Do we have to admit the truth? For example, in a courtroom, maybe against a relative or even against a child. I mean, the Holy Quran is clear to speak the truth no matter against whom. If it is a case of justice, that's a tough situation. You know, for example, like on the day of Ashura, putting our life on the line for what we believe. You know, there are some really big things that come up in life. We all have different tests. Our conscience tends to get in there and say, hello, you're having a test now. There's a right, there's a wrong. You know, like Hazrat Hur, peace be upon him. He was standing there on the day of Ashura. He sees the right, he sees the wrong, he sees Jannah, he sees Jahannam. He could have gone either way. Many people went the wrong way. He chose to go the right way, which is why we remember him. And these are the times that really do show us what our faith is. When we go back to Allah, we will go back to Allah having been tested in this world. So really, we just have to pray that Allah keeps us on the right path and shows us what the right path is. And one of the best ways to do that is to use the organ that Allah has given us, which is the organ of spiritual vision, which is the heart. The heart, according to Islamic teachings, sees things as they are. Now our heart may become dusty, it may become not quite so functional, but it is there. And if you just sit there and you spend some time in sincere reflection, and you shut out the distractions like we were talking about before, and you just ask Allah to show you what is the right path, it will be clear. Now, whether you will be willing to follow the right path is another matter. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes us a year or even a decade. And if we look at the Book of Allah, many times we understand from it what is clear too. So may Allah help us all with our trials in life and have us be successful dunya and akhirah.
Ahsan, thank you very much for that. Fortunately, we've come to the end of the show. It went very fast, and there's still so much that we wish to discuss with regards to the words of the Imam. And, I urge all the viewers at home to take this opportunity that, read the text that we have, read the words that we have with regards to the Imam, especially during this period. And that goes for all the other Imams as well, and I speak to myself here, is how much time and effort do we put into trying to actually understand the actual words that they said and what's recorded. So, inshallah, we can take that opportunity. Thank you once again for taking the time. Join us again tomorrow for another episode of Ahlul Bayt. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.